time to like hang out with myself, I guess, like to relax, give myself time to rejuvenate. Um, I don't really have a ton of free time, so I don't really know what that feels like. But when I do have free time, just like spending it on myself and not like trying to help others and please others.
That's good.
How do you, when you have free times to spend on yourself, what do you do? Like what's like fills your cup?
What fills my cup? Honestly, I don't know. Kind of just like hanging out on my phone, like just laying in bed, living my best life, watching YouTube, maybe sleeping every once in a while, sometimes, not very often. Yeah, just like watching shows and stuff.
You like time by yourself.
Time by yourself is important.
Yeah, that's
alone.
probably the biggest thing.
Is like not being around anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Tater, what do you do to unwind?
Well, it's kind of like it's basically the same thing as my hobbies. I guess I play video games, I go longboarding, and play football when it's kind of weather. But yeah, I feel like not distracting myself, but like finding other things to do is really beneficial. Yeah.
Like what?
Like longboarding, playing football, and playing video games.
Do you think that like whereas Zane feels like he needs to be by himself to recharge, do you feel like you get more charged up when you're like with people or with your friends?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I have too much time on my hands on like Zane, where
interesting.
I spend a lot more time by myself than I wish I didn't.
Oh,
I mean, like, it's not a bad thing.
No.
It's just like I like hanging out with people more than hanging out.
all right, guys. Last chance to Q&A for Zane and Tate. Last chance for Q&A for Zane and Tate. We're kind of looking at our computers to make sure that you don't have any questions. I gotta say, as a family, I feel like one of the things that we do to kind of relax, unwind, it depends. Like sometimes it's we'll try to have a meal together, put our phones down. Sometimes it's we'll try to go someplace that we've never been. Like even this weekend, we spent some time together as a family. And what was your favorite thing of like unwinding as a family? Like how did you feel like? I know what mine was, but
Well, I liked going to the outlet mall. That was what I
shopping.
Yeah.
What about you, Zane?
Probably working out together and then going in hot tubbing. That was really nice.
Hot tubbing was super fun.
Just being able to like go, like that's one thing that helps you almost counter. It's like weird. You wouldn't think that working out would help me rejuvenate, but like that's something that helps me like focus a lot. So like being able to work out and then go and relax is really good. Just like a combination of both those.
That's good, bro. That's
I like
good.
that.
All right. Thank you, boys, for if you have any more questions for these dudes, let us know. We'll try to get them back in here, but we're gonna get rolling. Now they want to peace out. So say bye.
Adios.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in tonight.
Yeah.
We are excited about this topic. I think it's a really important topic of, I think that one of the things that I often hear people say is when you say like, hey, how are you doing? How's it going? What's happening in your life? And, what's the number one answer that you hear? I'm busy. I'm busy. I'm so busy. Or they go in, and I say that too. Like I'll go into like all the things that I'm working on, like all the things that I have to get done today or tomorrow, or, and so I think that is a struggle with everyone. But before we kind of dive into all of, our content for tonight, Zane, can you grab him? The dog is taking something outside. So real life here at the Lynn House. But before we dive into our content tonight, we've got a gift card that
if you remember last week, we had the Target gift card, And we chose a winner based on how many shares and how much interacting is happening. And that winner is
Melissa Nicole.
Melissa.
That's what she Nicole. Melissa Nicole is what she goes by on
Oh,
Facebook.
okay, yes. So we will get that gift card to you, Melissa. We're so excited.
Woo! Congratulations.
Yes. I mean, nobody's gonna turn down a Target gift card. We all know that, right? This week we have this
Chili's
chili.
baby back ribs.
You know what's funny? We were there not that long ago, and I haven't been there forever.
Yeah, it was
And
good.
It was awesome. It was really good variety of food. So this is $25 to Chili's. So interact tonight. We will pick somebody who is interacting. If you have questions, ask questions. Even as we're going, just put them on the comments. We will comment.
I love some of these comments from Jesse. They were wondering when the boys' voices got so deep. I know, right? They get so.
Oh man,
yeah,
so
dude.
old all
And
the
bro,
time.
hot tub and workout. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah.
That's fun to vacation. We had a good time with our kids. So back to the topic. Is that it? We good?
Yeah. Yep.
So
So
make
we're
sure you.
make sure you comment, make sure you interact. We will pick someone this week and get you that Chili's gift card.
Yeah.
So
We're gonna dive right into the content tonight,
Yeah.
which is busyness and like I said to start, it's one time. Sometimes people go and you say, "What's going on? How are you?" And they're like, "I'm so busy.
I'm good, but I'm busy.
I've got so many things going on in my life," and I think that that's true. But I kind of think that sometimes we like almost wear our busyness as like this badge of honor. Like we're like, oh, we're and all it, because I do think that as a society, part of how we find our value is our work ethic, and meaning like if we work so hard, we're not good enough if we just don't work harder, or we're not good enough.
We don't do more. I think there's this idea that we should be doing more. We should always be doing more. We can do more. We should do more. And honestly, that's just not what's best for us when we are just doing more, not for the right reasons. I think there's plenty of good reasons to be busy, and we'll talk about that too. There's plenty of good reasons to feel overwhelmed, and lots of seasons of our lives we feel overwhelmed, and that's okay. That's a season, but we're talking about in general, just how are you dealing with what's on your plate, and then, are you being wise about all that you're doing and committing to as a individual, as a couple, as a family, all those things.
Yeah, and I think there's some interesting stats when we were looking at busyness and stress in America. Yeah. It says that 55%, and I think this is probably a low number, but according to a recent Gallup poll taken, that 55% of Americans are stressed, that 45% of Americans are extremely worried about something. And the other thing that was interesting about this is it says that America is the most stressed country in the world. So it's one of the things that's interesting about this is that we're the 11th, according to Forbes, we're the 11th wealthiest nation in the world, and that 25% of the world's economy comes through America, which is super interesting. And one of the biggest things that people worry about, money. One of the biggest things that people stress, even though we're one of the most wealthiest nations in the world, it's one of the things that we worry about. Other things that Americans worry about, health, the future of our country, their kids. Come on, somebody. Yeah. Trying to manage, I think, all these different things in our life. And I think that stress and burnout, stress can lead to burnout, not having good boundaries in your life, like we talked about in the first week, can lead to overworking. And so we're not just going to talk about stress and busyness, but eventually we're going to dive into some principles that we feel like could help with how do you set some things in motion to be refueled? How are you recharging? how are you resting? Because I think that this is not a problem that's just going to go away on its own. You are, especially if you have children, or you're working, or you're in leadership, or you might be in ministry. It's like, how many more things can you do well? And I feel like that's the tension with us, for us in particular. Like, I think that I have kind of learned, when I'm trying to learn ahead of time of like, and I'm trying to have some things in place ahead of time before I get to that place where I'm like, I'm done. I need like 2 weeks off, like, and so, cause most of us don't have that ability to just say, okay, I need to check out for 2 weeks.
Right.
And so I think understanding your symptoms and knowing a little bit of like, hey, I'm about to get to this point is super important. A couple different symptoms of being potentially overstressed or overworked, or maybe on the verge of being burnt out. I think one big one, and I just want to sit on this one for a second, is that everyone else is the problem. I think if you're married, sometimes your spouse is the first person to get the blunt of your stress. Yeah. And I think that sometimes you could say that about your kids, or maybe your coworker, and you find yourself finding reasons to blame everyone else for the stress that you might be experiencing, or the tension that you might be experiencing. Becky, you don't do that, do you?
Never. Lies. I'm totally lying. I remember when Travis, maybe I shared this a different week, Travis would come home from work, and I was home with our kids, and I had, 4 little kids, like babies, 2 babies, and then 2 preschoolers, basically. And I would be so overwhelmed and stressed, and I really needed a break, but didn't really feel like I could take a break or had options to take a break. And I would take it out on Travis when he'd come home. And it was not, and that's what we're talking about. When you feel the stress or the anxiety or feeling overwhelmed, and then the people closest to you should be the people that get the best of you.
Right.
But when they start to get that, irritated side, or the frustration, or things that they're just doing and they're not really doing anything wrong, but they're really kind of annoying you, like, that's when it's time to kind of take a inventory of like, what's going on in my own heart, and why am I frustrated with the people that I should be like so excited to see in the in the afternoon or evening, instead of that, I'm feeling annoyed or frustrated, and then taking that out on them. And so, like, really taking a good look at, where are you at? I feel like oftentimes we don't take time to do that, and we just assume that the other people are doing something wrong. But it does come back to us. We do have to be the people. And I just remember Travis just saying, like, you don't have to respond like that. You realize that, right? And I was like, oh, you're right. Like, I don't. And then just realizing, like, I have to, maybe it's, maybe I need to do something right before he comes home to kind of de-stress. So when he gets home, it isn't this like, I'm just going to explode. Just figuring out what that looked like for us.
Yeah, I think for me in this area of like when I'm feeling overstressed or overworked and I want to take it out on Becky or my kids, like for me, I want to be the leader, and I strive to be the leader and father and husband everywhere. Like that I'm not a different person at home than I am, on the platform at church, or that I'm not a different, and not to say that my kids don't see, sometimes I feel like we can be more intense at home, and that is the case. But as a leader and as a man, and as the father of my kids, I don't want them to see someone different in public as they see in private. Like I strive, like, so for me, when I'm when I'm stressed, and then I become almost like a victim where it's like, oh, it's everyone else. If everyone else would just do what I said, then the world would just be amazing. And that's just not reality. I mean, your kids don't always do what you say. Your boss certainly is not always going to do what you say. The people, if you're in your ministry, or, under you, if you're in leadership, they're not always going to do what you say. And so we can either determine like that this is kind of a principle, but we're going to respond versus react. Like I'm going to respond in a healthy way versus react in a negative way. And I think that's something that could be a principle there. But moving on to other symptoms in burnout, irritable, if you're consistently irritable, physical issues, stress is like a huge contributor to heart and cardiovascular issues. I actually love that Zane brought up working out and how working out is a stress reliever. You know what? One of those people, maybe you're like, working out, I don't want to work out. Dark chocolate is actually a stress reliever, like legit, like not overeating dark chocolate, but did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
Come on, man. So physically, like you can have symptoms, sleeplessness, and then there can even be some emotional, things that are caused from being too much stress, anxiety, depression, things like that, where you actually you feel like I don't have control. I can't get out of bed because I can't face what I have to face today, or my moods are so dark that it's hard for me to interact. And so we want to talk about like, what are some things that you can do, that we do, to kind of maybe break out of this cycle that the grind, the rat race that, our world kind of has us in. What are some things we can do to break out of that? And what are some things that we can do to be proactive so that we don't get to that place of just completely being overwhelmed all the time? And what are some ways that we can refuel? And again, this is a live group, so if you have questions or comments, I appreciate the comments. And Jesse, thanks for those recommendations. Appreciate the encouragement here. Feel free to add value, or if you have questions along the way, we're trying to watch your questions as we go here.
Yeah,
so
we'll interact as we go.
So the next kind of thing, the first principle that I think that is important when it comes to managing stress, managing the tension of maybe all the responsibilities that we have, is that to evaluate, what am I working for? What am I working for? And I think that the reason why we're gonna talk about these first few are about evaluating, like kind of assessing where are we at in life. But I think asking the question, what am I working for, is huge, because in the book of Colossians, Paul says in chapter 3, verse 23, it says, work whatever work you do it with all your heart, as if working for the Lord and not for men. And I think that we can find ourselves working for approval rather than working from approval. We can find ourselves working for a paycheck, for I want to prove myself. I've got a chip on my shoulder and I'm going to just show everyone how amazing I am. I've got to please my boss, or I've got to please my wife, or I've got whatever. I've got to make it. I've got a goal for myself, and I'm so idealistic that I'm winning, and I don't even realize that I've won. And it's like I've even found myself with this struggle where you like get to one plateau, or you reach one milestone, and you're just like, whoa, yeah, we won. And then you enjoy that moment for like 2 seconds, and you're like, all right, what's next? Yeah,
Yeah.
what's next? And so what am I working for? I
Yeah.
think is a really important question.
Yeah, and I think, that can go across the board. Any area of your life, you can ask yourself that question, why am I striving so much in this area? Or why is it so important for me, to make it look like I have it together, or to make it like, why do I have to go above and beyond what would be necessary? What is motivating me? What's driving me? What's pushing me? And you know what? It's good to have goals, and it's good to strive towards success, and those are all really good things, but we just want to check our motives. Are we comparing ourselves to others, and that's why? Is that motivating us to do more, or to say yes more often, or to go above and beyond in areas where maybe we don't need to do that? Are we trying to prove ourselves as a parent and try to make it look like we have it together when we know we don't, because none of us do, right?
Right.
Are we trying to do career-wise? Are we trying to just go after things just to go after things, or is there meaning behind that? Is there something that we're chasing that's meaningful?
Yeah.
And if it's not, like, why are we? What is it in us that's making us do that? And I think, when we work really, it's, we, especially in the Midwest, I feel like we have some of the best work ethic that you will find anywhere. And it's such an awesome thing. And I want our kids to have great work ethic. I mean, that's a goal. I want to have great work ethic. We expect our staff and the people that, serve under us to have great work ethic. I mean, that's a really good, positive thing. But sometimes our work ethic becomes like the driving force as well. Like, maybe you were taught, like, you don't need to sit down. Like, even when you get home, like, there's so much to do. There's always something to do. Don't sit. Like, you have stuff to do. That's not our problem.
Yeah.
That's not our problem. But I know that in this culture, that can be even something like that can just, it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
Almost. It can bring anxiety. It can bring, it doesn't create a peaceful environment for you to be in. And so, anyways, I think there's a lot of ways that we can stress, or a lot of, pieces of our life that we can, overexert ourselves without a lot of great reason or meaning. It's just because that's what people do. Or I know even, career-wise, it's easy to fall into, well, everybody else stays an hour or two after work, I got to do that too. And that goes back to the whole boundary thing. We got to just set really healthy boundaries in our lives and stick to them, and not feel bad about that. Because you know what? Those other people, they want boundaries too. They're just not going to set them for themselves. But maybe we could start that,
Yeah. Along with this topic, someone asked the question, I'm an achiever, and I want to do the best and keep moving forward. The dark side of that is not taking breaks or celebrating wins.
Yeah.
Any tips to break that? Well, I mean, I just feel like you're preaching to the choir. Like, that's our struggle consistently. I think something that I shared with a friend of mine today, actually, we were talking about this same thing, and I said, think 10-year versus 10 weeks. Like, what do I want? What is the win for the next decade? Like, what are, like, think big picture wins, as opposed to, even just from a work perspective, maybe like for us, like, oh, it's an attendance barrier, or we want more life groups, or we need more team leads, or, just put in, like, a lot of times, sometimes our barriers are, we're just trying to assess metrics and figure out, okay, how do we get better in those areas? Because if we get better in those areas, that means people, get free and people get saved. And so, so I think, especially if you're in the ministry, because this person was in the ministry who asked that question, I think the big thing is understanding, like, what does God, like, defining specifically, like, what does God say is successful?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have obviously organizational metrics that you are accountable to that are important, but really knowing in your heart, like, when I go to bed at night, I could be my biggest enemy, or I can be my biggest advocate. And I want to be my biggest advocate. And one of the ways that I can be my biggest advocate is by going, man, God is pleased with me today. because of who Jesus is and who I am in him. And so even if I had a really crappy day, I can, find forgiveness and acceptance in Jesus.
Yeah.
But then also knowing like, man, I worked hard. I did the best that I could. I didn't see the results that I wanted to, but I need to rest in knowing like that my conscience is clean and God is pleased with my work. And I want to find satisfaction and enjoyment in the ride. I think so many times we can just be like, I'm pushing to the next thing, the next milestone, that we just don't enjoy the ride. And as far as like celebrating the wins, again, it's defining the wins, like what's, bringing people along with you, like stopping and slowing down. Like for us, just like slowing down with our kids and going, wow, like our kids are amazing. Like that's the one, in my opinion, like one of the best things that have come from our life is our kids. And so like just celebrating them and looking at them in the face and saying, man, you're crushing it. Like, I'm so proud of you.
And also, I think a huge key to this is finding someone that's further down on the journey. So somebody that's ahead of you. Maybe they're ahead of you by 5 years. Maybe it's, depending on whatever stage you're in. I know for us, parenting-wise, it's so great to have friends who have older kids who've been through what we were going through with our own kids. Church-wise, work for us, it's so great to have friends who are farther in the journey. They've been at this longer than us. They can look at our situation and truly assess it from an outside perspective and go, here's where you're winning. This is like amazing, where we can't see that always. And even with our own kids, I think, in our own family or marriage or whatever, getting other people involved is huge. We have a question here. It says, how can we approach a situation that makes us feel overwhelmed, but it's something we have to do and we don't necessarily enjoy, like cleaning, laundry, paying bills? I want to answer this question. Because
I'm just going to take the camera into our laundry room and you can see how well we're winning at this.
No, but listen, this is why I want to answer this question. I have this friend on Instagram and she's like super organized on top of it, like really awesome. And she does all these cool organizational things and shows you all this stuff. But one of the things she started doing was she would, like one day she showed her messy storage room and then she sets a timer, cleans it up and like sets her camera up, of course, because she's an Instagrammer. But I wouldn't do that personally. But some people do that. I wouldn't do that because my mess is 100 times worse than probably many of your messes. But I wouldn't do that. But actually, I don't even think I know how to do that. But she does it, and then she sets a timer, and then she'll put on there, I cleaned this whole room. I put this job off for 3 months, and it took me 5 minutes. And you see the timer on her phone, and she's just like, how many jobs do I put off? Because I think I don't want to do them, and it literally is like less than 10-minute job. And so I think if we just take that attitude, like one thing I recently started doing, which sounds really funny because most people do their own dishes, but for years our kids have been in charge of loading and unloading the dishwasher, and I finally got sick of their not paying attention, and I just needed to do it for myself for a while. And so I did. I just said, you kids are no longer in charge of dishes. I'm going to do that because it's making me crazy.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and that's a job I hate doing, but literally I will brew my coffee in the morning, and in the time it takes me to prep my coffee, I've already unloaded the dishwasher. And it's like, why do I hate this job so much? It literally is like a 2-minute job that I would have put off all day had it not, So I think like taking that as your perspective of like, and maybe that's what you do. Maybe you need to do that for yourself. Set a timer and time yourself and go, oh, it actually only takes me 3 whole minutes to switch the laundry. Like I can do this,
Yeah.
And I think it could be motivational. So
I think another thing that could potentially help with that, and then we got to move on because we're like so far behind, but I love the questions. Keep the questions coming. Keep the questions coming. The questions are more important than anything that we have. But I think another thing that can help is maybe switch the routine up. Like if you are married, which we know that you are, who asked this question, maybe switch the routine up. Maybe you do the dishes and he does the laundry, or maybe, if you're like, oh, like let's switch the routine up a little bit this week. I think that sometimes that helped. We were in this kind of this rut for like probably the same kind of chore system in our house for
a while.
For probably at least like 2-3 years. And if you're hearing that noise, that's my dogs.
No, we normally
Woodrow.
kennel them up.
No,
he's fine, honey. He's just wagging his tail.
We normally kennel them up, but we let them out tonight, which was a dumb idea. Anyways,
at least they're not making an appearance on the camera.
We switched up the routine because we were like, okay, this isn't working well. And
it was frustrating to us. I think our kids were getting frustrated, and it actually changed everything. It made it so much better. And yeah, if you have kids, I mean, get your kids involved. Like I just refuse. And this is just me being really stubborn, and Travis is stubborn too, so it works out for us. But like, we just refuse to like do everything for our kids.
Yeah.
Because at some point they're gonna have to know how to load a dishwasher. They're gonna have to know how to wash their own clothes. They're gonna have to know how to run a vacuum, and what does it look like after you've dusted.
And
like,
I would say you can start that as soon as they're able to do something small, like. Just because I feel like that is a part of teaching them responsibility and keeping them away from entitlement.
And it's an easy thing to start with. It makes us crazy as parents because sometimes you can do the job faster and better, but it's worth it in the long run. So
next kind of tip for looking at stress, looking at evaluating your life and figuring out is evaluate the source. So like, maybe this is a stressful thing that keeps coming up, and like there's something that keeps coming up, and I think understanding like, where is this coming from? If it's about money, what can I do about that? Maybe I need to do some Dave Ramsey stuff, or maybe I need to trust God in this area more, or maybe it's with my children and there's some control issues with my kids that I kind of need to, but what is the source of this coming from? What is the source of that anxiety? And then what are you saying about that? Like, do you have God's perspective about that? Or are you leaning on your own understanding? Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Sometimes it's like, we know these scriptures, but we don't necessarily like own them, but trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Like, he will guide your paths. Like, he will give you what you need. And I think that whole like, acknowledge him in all your ways and ask him like, God, am I trusting you? Am I trusting you in this situation? And
I think another scripture, it says that God just tells us like, my burden is light. I want to trade my burden for your heavy burden. Many of us are walking around with really heavy burdens.
Right.
And like, we just are, it's affecting everything. Yeah. And it's stressful and it's exhausting and it's overwhelming. And, God really truly wants to take that burden from you and give you his burden, which he says is light. And I don't know about you, but I need that. And many times there is way more going on in my life than I have the ability to handle or figure out or fix on my own. And if I, set out to do it on my own, I fail every time. But if I let God into that situation and allow him to help me and guide me and direct me and to take the burden, God's peace it's like unexplainable. And we need that. We need that in our chaotic lives and our busy lives. And if we don't have that, then we need to ask God to give that to us. And so those are things that, we need from him. And as we follow him, we need to be proactive in seeking that, because
absolutely.
I think many times we forget, like, God is kind of our like last resort. And I think now we know, and Travis and I, we've lived long enough, because we're not as young as some of you, that we literally are like, we we need to pray about stuff before it gets to the point where we're just like overwhelmed by it. We just need to begin with prayer, you know?
Yeah. I feel like that's a good tie into the next one, which is this next one is kind of going to be a little bit like, what? But there's a scripture in Acts that talks about refreshing, like entering into times of refreshing. In Acts chapter 3, verse 19, it says, repent and turn to God, but kind of what Becky was saying, so that your sins may be wiped out and that times of refreshing may come from the Lord. So I think that we would be amiss to say that, all of us, all of humanity, everyone has struggles with sin. We have struggles, and sin isn't just like I get drunk all the time, or I'm a drug addict, or I eat too many Oreos after 1 o'clock in the morning. Like, sin is missing the mark. It's like missing like the best. It's like, and we all sometimes miss the best. Like sometimes we honestly, sometimes we're so striving for the best that we kind of miss what's the main thing, what's really important. I mean, being overworking can be a sin, thinking about not being present. And anyways, we can go on and on about what sin is, but I think that the thing that's important about the scripture, if we want times of refreshing, the word repent, sometimes we look at that as like a really heavy word. No word, because repentance is I turn away from that thing that I have been doing that's causing me stress, anxiety, pain, the thing that is the source of the tension in my life that I keep choosing over God. And so I'm prone to that. My heart is prone to wander, and I'm prone to sin because that's in me. So what do I have to do? I turn to Jesus and I look to God for all the fruits of the Spirit, all the things that He wants in my life. And I turn away from that thing so that I can turn to Jesus. And then when I turn to Jesus and I repent of those things, the Bible says that there's times of refreshing that come from God. It's amazing. It's incredible.
Yeah. And we need that. I mean, even if we have really hectic, busy lives, we have time for that. We can make time for that. We can make time to allow God to refresh us and to really take a few minutes and look at, where are we at? What is causing us stress? How could we make a change in that, Alrighty.
I'm having to text my daughters.
Oh gosh. I don't know if you can hear them, but they're like laughing. When they're tired, they get really giddy and they like cannot stop laughing. And so they're just laughing so hard.
I'm texting them right now. Repent.
Stop laughing so loud. That's horrible that we have to say that to our kids. Next thing, should I keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
The next thing here is no is a spiritual word. We talked about boundaries week 1 of this group, and we just can't say this enough, but no is not a bad word. Many of us have been raised, in families where we just don't say no to anything. We don't choose what we do. We just say yes. If someone asks us, then of course we should do that. So we're going to say yes. But I think creating healthy rhythms in our lives requires us to say no when we know we can't do it. And it isn't necessarily that we don't want to do it. There's a lot of times when we have opportunities to do stuff and we have to say no, not because we wouldn't enjoy it or it wouldn't be fun or we couldn't make it.
Or that I might be like good at it. Like I could crush that thing.
Right. But we just have to take an overall look at our rhythms and figure out, is this something that we truly can fit into our life? And if it's not, then we have to say no. And if it is, then we should say yes. But I think so many times we're programmed to just say yes. Like, okay, I can do that. Yes, I can do it. But the reality is we shouldn't be saying yes to everything. There's a lot of times we need to say no. Some of us are in seasons where we have to say no now, but in the future we could say yes to that. And sometimes maybe that is the perspective we need to realize, like, different seasons require different things of us. Right now, for us, our family is super busy. We spend a lot of time driving kids to and from things. We've been really intentional about only allowing our kids to do a certain number of activities. They know that. They don't do 3 sports a year because we have 4 kids. We can't do it. We just don't have enough drivers right now to even support that sort of a schedule. And so we've been really clear with our kids, like, this is what we will allow you to do. These are the activities that we can do, and we can't do more than that. Not because we don't think it would be great for you, but we just have to protect our family as well. We're in a unique situation where our weekends typically aren't our own. And so we don't have the luxury of,
Right.
Having a full weekend off with our family, which we're good with that. We knew that signing up for this, but it makes our answer no happen more often because of that. A lot of things that we could do happen on the weekend, and we just can't do it. And so some of us just haven't really practiced that skill though. And that's causing stress in our lives because we haven't been able to get the courage to say no. But it's super important, and it isn't a bad thing.
Yeah. I want to talk about some things that we can do that will be, we've talked about maybe how do we deal with some things that if we're in a bad rut or if we're in a bad routine or maybe we're already overwhelmed, setting up those boundaries, maybe needing to repent of some things in our lives, evaluating the sources of where is these things coming from, evaluating what I'm working for, looking at our motives. But I want to talk about something that I think has been a key for Becky and I, because I do feel like even though we're in one of the busiest seasons of our life, first off, it's not going to get any easier because every time we say yes to God, there's more things that we have to learn how to navigate through and manage. The bigger our church gets, there's more things that we have to navigate through and manage. The older our kids get, there's some things that are easier, but then there's some things that require more of my attention and more of me being proactive. And so how do we get into a place where we're refueling? Yeah. And what I mean by that is like, what are we doing to like replenish our hearts, our bodies, our minds, our emotions? How are we like, and I just have to say, I feel like this is something that I've had to learn. It's not something that I naturally am great at. One person commented on here that they feel like that they really struggle with just taking times for themselves. And this mom, I know she's crushing it at home and she's just struggling. Like, how do I take time from doing? Balance is a real struggle, and it 100% is. And so I think what we're going to talk a little bit right now is like the replenishment. Like, how do you replenish your soul, and how do you refuel your soul, and what things do you have in place to make sure that happens? And I want to just stop before we talk about some of these things, because I want to say this is sometimes the place that we just check out, because sometimes we think, oh yeah, I know, that's nice, that's great. But actually, like, the only way that you're going to be able to be entrusted with more is if you learn to be faithful. And the only way that you can be faithful with what you have is for you to be on point. And when I say on point, meaning like that you're not operating from empty, that you're not operating from a place of bitterness, that you're not operating from a place of obligation or frustration but you're operating from a place like Jesus said, that I've come to give you life and life abundantly. And so how do we consistently do that? How do we do that? And someone put on here, go to church, come on, preach. That's actually one of our points. But one of the ways that you
should go to church,
refuel your soul, is to get in the presence of God. And I want to talk about this for a second, because I grew up kind of going to church occasionally. My mom would be the first to tell you that if we could do anything different as a kid, when I was a kid, is that we would have gone and made church more of a priority. But I didn't even know Jesus, but I didn't really know what the presence of God was. Like, I didn't know that you could like get in God's presence. I was like, what in the world does that even mean. But there's this awesome scripture that I want to read. It's in Psalms chapter 16. It says this: "You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there's fullness of joy." What a promise. "And at your right hand are pleasures forevermore." At your right hand are pleasures. So the things that we're looking for in life, joy, pleasure, the scripture says here that we can find them in the presence of God. And I really think that it's important for us to not skip this step, because this is one of the things that we can just get so busy doing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the Martha, the story of Martha and Mary. One being so busy doing, serving,
Mm-hmm.
that she just forgot to just sit at the feet of Jesus and listen. And so for me, I have to get in the presence of God every day. And so there might be, yes, do I need to have time in the Bible, in prayer? 100%. I try to start my morning at some point in the morning before I have my first appointment. I'm trying to get in the presence of God. But also periodically through the day, I'm singing a song from one appointment to the next, or I'm taking a moment, even just with my kids, and just in the room, with my family in the room, and just being like, God is here, God is with us. His presence is here. And I feel like it brings an eternal perspective that can sometimes shift that angst, that work, that almost like that slave mentality, like I gotta go, 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 versus no, I'm a son of God.
Mm-hmm.
I can have peace and joy in the presence of God, and the presence of God is real. I'm even praying. I just pray right now that you would experience the presence of God in your living room or in your car or wherever you're listening to this. That the presence of God would lift your countenance, that it would lift your soul, that it would lift burdens. Maybe you are going through a hard trial right now, that the presence of God would come and lift the burden off of your life.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, I think it's really hard to have peace and be content and be okay, not be overwhelmed without God in our lives. And many of us, we know that because we've tried it, right? We've tried to live without God. And speaking specifically to that comment, I think when you are a parent and you have a spouse and you have a job and you have a home to keep up, there really isn't a great time for you to take time for yourself. I mean, there just isn't going to be a time that seems right or convenient. But I would say this, we have to change our mindset on that and recognize that it is worth it to take 10 or 15 minutes. I'm actually, I'm a little guilty of, like, I don't like to do things unless I can do like multiple things at once. I don't know why. It just like bothers me, like I'm wasting time or something. And so a lot of times, like, just for an example, because I do think that sometimes it really is like, maybe you are with your kids, you're a stay-at-home mom, or you're with your family, what feels like 24/7. I don't feel like you have time. But even little things that I started doing, I would, as I'm getting ready in the morning, you can actually have the YouVersion Bible app to you, which that's like my favorite thing to do, because I'm doing what I normally be doing. So I'm like getting ready, I'm getting dressed and like doing my makeup and hair and all that, or maybe I'm in the kitchen unloading the dishwasher, making coffee, getting food prep, whatever, and I can have the Bible app reading the Bible to me. So I'm not I'm not just focusing on the Bible, which maybe for some people that's really hard to do, but for me, it actually it's so nice. Maybe podcasts are a thing, or maybe, your prayer time is best when you're driving kids around in a car. And, and I always think we get so stuck on it, putting these sorts of things in like this really standard box. Like,
Yep.
It should happen for this amount of time at this time, and if it doesn't all happen at once, then it's not legit. And I just want to say that that's not true.
Yeah.
And you know what? For years, I would be praying under my breath, usually help me Jesus.
Come on.
For years under my
Preach.
breath. Oh, when I was home. But literally, like even now, I mean, a lot of times, like I will be in my car and I will just purposely turn music on where I know I can like really spend a couple minutes with God. And it isn't fancy, it's nothing special. I mean, if you sat in there with me, you'd be like, oh, this is fine, whatever. But it just is me determining that I'm going to make time for that. And it doesn't have to be an hour of prayer and Bible reading. It literally might be 10 minutes here and there, or it might be 5 minutes here and there, but just making that a priority. I also think self-care is a huge part of
Yep,
this.
for sure.
And I mean, the spiritual component is one piece of it, and I think that that's vital. But there's a whole other part of it, which, you know, when we started working together, I think we realized that there are some things in life that fill our cups. So
Yeah.
that those are the things that when you get done doing it, you are so pumped up. You loved every second of it. You wished it would have lasted longer. And then there are things where it maybe is a 20-minute thing, but it feels like 6 hours because it's so draining to you and you don't look forward to it. You look forward to it being over, and it actually is really, it takes you time to recover from that thing. And so like learning that about yourself is huge. There are things that we do in our schedules, and I realize not everyone has the opportunity to make their own schedule, but when it comes to work, but if I know there's certain type of meetings that drain me, I'm not going to schedule my day with 3 or 4 meetings like that. I just can't do it. I can handle one of those surrounded by meetings that actually are really uplifting to me. And so like just being aware of that, what drags you down, what gets you pumped up, and being aware of how much you are allowing either of those to take place in your life on, you know, any given day or in your week or in your month, because I think that it just makes such a big difference, you know.
Yeah, that's a game changer. I mean, if you know that if you're going to have a meeting that just completely drains you, and then you know, like, hey, if I hang out with some of my favorite people, you know who you are. You're probably watching right now. But if I hang out with some of my favorite people, they're going to just fill my cup, you know,
Yeah.
or like we might have a tough conversation scheduled. And that means that when we get home, we're not going to have any more conversations about work because that was really draining. And then the next day, you know, so I think that having a consistent rhythm where you figure out, hey, I need to be aware of my schedule. I'm going to be intentional about doing things that fill my cup on a consistent basis. And that goes into another kind of, there's different ways that you replenish. You know, I tried to start the evening with just allowing the boys to share a little bit about the differences of how they replenish. One of them was like, let's spend money. You know, one of them was like, let's go shopping. Let's hang out with friends. And the other one was like, I like to be by myself and I need to have time alone. And I just want to be able to have time where I can do my own thing. And I completely think that is, you know, important for you to know, like, what replenishes your soul. And there are some certain things that we're going to talk about specifically that I think that when it comes to like having a things that consistently replenish you, there's multiple things that can replenish you. I mean, obviously sleep is good. Most people don't get enough sleep, but also like one of the things Becky and I did recently is we took this test to see like how much, you know, margin we had in our life with our brain capacity. How much margin did we have in our life regarding our faith community? Like we went and did all this evaluation, and both of us, neither one of us had much margin with our brain capacity. The guy that we were doing, you know, this coaching with said, you guys both are you're overstretched in this area. And so meaning like there wasn't a lot of time for my brain to just stop and reflect and rest. And I actually have a quote about that. I think it's really important. It says, John Maxwell said that we're so busy that we don't have time to actually think well. we're so busy that we don't have time to actually think well. And I think that a mental recharge, like mentally recharging your mind. And so that means sometimes it means getting it engaged in something that doesn't always feel productive. For example, I'm going to read a book, and with that in particular, reading a book that isn't, for me, ministry focused or leadership focused, but maybe it's about something else, like cooking barbecue, or Becky loves to read and study about birds.
That's a lie. That is a flat out lie.
She loves, like,
I hate birds.
Bird watching is
Ew.
like her favorite thing ever.
It's me screaming and running and ducking is what bird. Sometimes there's tears too, so it's not pretty. That's not true.
But like having something though that you can read, that like I like to read about history, or I like to read about certain things that aren't per se ministry related, but they get my mind active. I like to learn, and I like to learn things that are, and so not just like, so there's the mental stimulation that's important, mentally getting refreshed.
Yeah.
You want to say anything about that, or move to the next one?
I just think, like, many of us don't even have time in our day to, like, I had a day today where it was a busy day, and I just needed like 10 minutes to not think about anything.
You're right.
And not like have anyone need anything from me, or not respond to anybody, on my phone. And I just needed like a few minutes to clear my mind. And some of us just need that. Like, we need to give ourselves permission to have a little bit of time. And it's hard. I get it. Like, it's hard. We're just jumping from one thing to the next, and that's okay. I mean, that's life, but you got to figure out, how do you decompress from all of that? Because if you just run like that consistently, your brain does need time to rest, and not just when you're sleeping.
Yep.
But like, it needs to refocus on something different. Some of us get kind of stuck. I'm one of those people. I can get really stuck in one thought category, and or rerun something in my brain that happened, or that I said, or a conversation, or an interaction. And instead, we need to like jump out of that and figure out what is it that we could do that pulls us out of that. Some of us need to like remove ourselves from reality for a little bit, get sucked into a good book, get sucked into, a great movie or podcast or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, I think another thing that's important is giving back. Giving back, actually, I think I might have shared this in another one of our online life groups, but one of the greatest ways to reduce stress is to community service in your community. And
not like community service like you got in trouble with the law, like go out and do something good in your community.
Well, why do you think that they have them do that?
I'm just saying, like, we're not saying community service like that. We're saying, hey,
volunteer.
Find a place to volunteer.
Get it? Yeah. And if you're looking for community service hours, we will let you fill them at Relevant Life Church, just so you know.
Actually, people have done that.
They have. But no, legit, like, volunteer at your church, volunteer at your kid's school, do something that has you get no reward for it except the sheer joy of just knowing that you made a difference. And it's a tremendous stress relief. It's so good for us. I actually think that it helps us to focus on what really matters. Next one that I want to talk about, as far as like replenishing cycles, doing something consistently, but like, who do you have in your life that's speaking purpose, destiny, and just encouraging you? I mean, I don't know about you, but I just need encouragement, man. I just need someone to go, hey, you like are making a difference. And I'm a words of affirmation guy. And so I need to put myself in a place where people can speak into my life. And for me, I have several different people who do this in different ways. I have I have mentors that are more of like family mentors, like they're people that I look up to that are great dads, great husbands. I have work mentors, like people that are pastors that are ahead of us. I have friends that I can just call and say, dude, today was a rough day. I have my wonderful and beautiful wife. But I have people in my life that when it comes to like replenishment cycles, and this is something that we've relatively started doing, that's new, but we try to actually get away, like leave our normal rhythm and pace and go visit friends who understand kind of the same season that we're in and spend time with them and even get our kids around their kids and do things more together on for us, like we just even as a family determine quarterly we're either going to do a vacation or even a staycation, you know, where we might stay, but okay, we're going to have family time and we're going to, you know, no, you can't have friends over because it's time for you to hang out with your family. But like,
They love that.
Yeah, no Snapchat. You know, but like legit, like having times where I'm consistently stopping and letting people speak into my life, having times where I'm speaking into my kid's life, and that refuels me, that replenishes me. Because here's the thing, we all sometimes feel guilty and we feel stressed and overworked because we're not making the things that matter a priority. And I, you know, I remember somebody told me this quote about money, and I thought it was just a great quote, but I think we could use it for time as well. But the quote was, stop wondering where your money went and start telling your money where to go. You know, and I think in the same thing is like, stop wondering where all the time went and start telling, you know, your time where to go, like what you're going to do with it, like what actually matters. You are not a victim or a slave to the clock. You have full control. I love thinking this way, you have just as much time as Albert Einstein did. You have just as much time as these people in the past that invented incredible things and did, you know, you think about the great icons in our history, and you have just as much time in the day as they did. And some of them were great parents and great leaders and did incredible things. And so let's stop being victims to everything else in our world. Let's take ownership of our lives. Let's put in systems that fill our cup so that we can be the best pastors and leaders and parents and husbands and wives and kids. Like we don't have to be a victim to the hustle and bustle and the busyness of this world. We're not slaves to that. We are children of God, and we have the ability to focus on what does God want me to focus on.
Yeah.
I want to make sure too, Becky's gonna jump in here and say a few things, but we're kind of wrapping up here, and so just make sure if you have questions, thoughts, comments, please engage in this time, so that we can get to them before the end of our time.
Yeah, we'd love to answer questions. I would say this as well. Sometimes in our lives, we find ourselves in relationships with people that actually aren't very positive or uplifting in our lives. And some of those relationships we don't have control over. There may be a family member or someone you work with or something like that. But a lot of times we do have control over those relationships, and we can actually determine who we spend time with or who we don't spend time with. And I would just say this, find the people that when you leave spending time with them, you just want to hang out with them again because it was so encouraging, so uplifting, so awesome. And I just think many times we've spent years of our lives, some of us, hanging out with people that just are not very encouraging. And we end up feeling like this is it. This is what we have. No, I'm telling you, it is worth it to find friends that will actually be encouraging and uplifting. You know, like Travis was saying, we have people in our lives that when we hang out with them, it is easy, it is fun,
Yeah.
it fills us up. We can't wait to do it more. And when you find those people in your life, like hold on to them,
Come on.
communicate that to them, let
Yep.
them know that. And because I'm guessing that they feel the same way, you know, a lot of times it's a very mutual thing. And so when you do that, you know, it is important to embrace those relationships. If you don't have those kind of friendships, then like start looking, start taking notes, start paying attention. And I think that will change so much too. We, you know, just as parents, we want our kids to have, you know, great friendships that are life-giving, that they're encouraging, that they don't feel like they're, you know, dragging them down, you know, that they're kind of at the same place in their life and they have similar values, and those things are important. And so I think we all need friends. We all, even if you're an introvert, you need people in your life. And so it is so important that we seek that. And when you find that, like, just make the most of it. I also think figure out what is helping you feel better. So there are times, like recently, I told Travis, like, I just started working out again, which I hate working out. But I will tell you this, I feel so much better. I was just talking to a friend the other day, and she said the same thing. I don't love working out. You know, you're always a little uncomfortable when you start working out again. But when you do work out, your mental, like for me, I feel so much better just across the board. And so, like, for me, it's like, it's not like I'm like, whoa, yay, I'm going to work out. But I know the end result will actually make my day so much better.
Yep.
And maybe for you, it's taking a walk on your break at work versus sitting in the break room. Or maybe for you, it's spending time, like making and, you know, being purposeful and planning, you know, a coffee date with a good friend, or spending time reading a book, or going to Target by yourself, you know, like whatever it is, like take note of the things where you're like, oh, I just want to do that more. I feel so much better. And then implement them. You should be doing things every single day that refuel you.
Yep.
It shouldn't be like even once a week. It should be daily. You need time to refuel yourself, especially, you know, we're in a position where we're pouring into people, we're caring for people, we're, you know, interacting with people all day, every day, and then we have our own family on top of that. If you're in a service sort of job, even more so, it's important that you make that a priority. And so just keeping that in mind, it shouldn't be like a weekly or monthly thing. It should be a daily thing. What is it that you're going to do today that's going to refuel you, that you will be able to have a better day because of it?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, really, that's it for tonight as far as content goes. We tried to answer. I believe we got everyone's questions, and thank you guys so much for the comments. There's some encouraging comments on here. Appreciate that. This is our last online life group for this series of Family Matters, and I tell you what, as far as an online life group goes, the engagement, the interaction, the connections that we had, really fun. We definitely will do this again. I don't know when, but we'll do this again. And we're super thankful for just you investing time and investing.
Yeah, just taking time. Just, I mean, because it's like now it's, I don't even know what time. I'm sure
9:15.
Yeah, like you're taking time and watching this and just, you know, many of you hung out this whole time with us, and thanks for doing that, because you know, it's something new that we just wanted to try. We wanted to make it so we could interact with more people and make it accessible for more people. And so thanks for making that happen. We're so glad that you took time out of your schedule to watch and interact. Loved your questions and comments, and we'll probably do this again. I don't know when, but we'll try to do it again.
Yep, for sure. And if you make sure, where's the card at? Make sure you share or tag a friend. We will contact you to share who the winner is. And I'm going to put in a shameless plug here for this weekend. Vision Weekend at Relevant Life Church.
Yes.
We're sharing
It's
about
really awesome.
we're sharing our new vision mission statement on Sunday morning, and then Sunday night we're talking about our values and just sharing about where we're going as a church, who are we as a church, and got a brand new song from Relevant Life Worship that we'll be singing Sunday night. You don't want to miss. And
It's really great.
thanks everyone for tuning in. We're super grateful and honored that you would spend some time with us. And if you feel like you didn't get maybe question answered, or you felt like you don't want to share something publicly, feel free to personal message us, and we will try to get back to you. And we just, again, praying that this is an encouragement to you, praying that, even as you're listening to this tonight, that you'll just make a decision for maybe some things to change, for you to get some health into your relationships and into your life. Jesus paid a tremendous price for you, for your mental, emotional, and for your physical health. And so let's respond to that. Let's own that. Let's receive God's best. And I think our world, our families, our marriages, our own personal life will be better.
That's right.
Pray that you just have a great night. And thanks again for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.